Good evening, welcome back. It is Monday, August 21st, 2023. We have a few birthdays and a few events to go over, so let's go over the events really quickly. On this day in 1988, Davey Allison won at Michigan. Yes, I was at this race as well. It was a pretty good race, kind of a special race in a couple ways. Davey's first win after his father's horrible crash a couple months earlier at Pocono, and it was Richard Petty's final start on a track 2 miles or greater. So I thought that was pretty fun little fact, because the rest of the year the biggest tracks would be Atlanta and Charlotte at 1.5 miles each, Darlington at 1.3 whatever it was, and of course Rockingham, Dover at 1 mile each. And Riverside by this point had been taken off the schedule at the end of the year. There's a pit fire mid-race. Brett Bodine spun in his pits. Sterling Marlin's car, I don't know if it was related, but they were pitted side by side. And Marlin's car caught fire. Gasman Gerald Oakley suffered burns on his arms and I believe his face and neck a little bit, but he did recover. Kind of a scary thing that happened. I remember it happening plain as day. You just kind of one of those things, you heard a pop, then you hear a lot of people scream and pointing. We were sitting in the stands. Dad got a couple pictures of it. He's always good on the camera. So, pretty cool. Set of events, not the pit fire, but the Richard Petty's last start on a 2 mile track or greater, Davey's win, etc., etc. On this day in 1994, another Michigan race that I attended. Of course, this was the weekend of Ernie Irvan's horrible crash that had happened the day before, which I missed yesterday's video. But Jeff Bodine won this race. It was the last race that Robert Yates Racing would withdraw from, because they did withdraw in 93 at Pocono after Davey's death. And of course, they withdrew after this race, after Ernie's crash. But that would essentially gift wrap the 7th title for Dale Earnhardt, as he had basically an insurmountable lead at that point. He would go on and wrap up the title with 2 races left at the conclusion of the Rockingham race. Jeremy Mayfield did have a issue with his hood during the race, and it almost landed in the crowd. It did fly off on the front stretch. He did have an onboard of that, but the cameras caught it from an external view, and it landed probably 30 feet from a spectator area just past the pit lane on the inside of the track. So, pretty spectacular there. 2005... we just spoke of Jeremy Mayfield. 2005 at Michigan, Jeremy would win his final career NASCAR Cup Series race. Scott Riggs would finish a career-best second that day. Of course, this would elevate Jeremy to the then chase for the NASCAR Cup. So that would wrap up a couple weeks later at Richmond, and then you'd set the playoff field. And then I made an error in yesterday's video. I just seen 22 Kyle Larson, Watkins Glen was thanking that yesterday was the Cup race. Actually, today was the Cup race 1 year ago that Larson won. Yesterday was the Xfinity race, because Larson swept the weekend. But in both cases, basically a team car or a step team car, satellite team car, had issues that helped him to win, because in the Xfinity Series race, the 17 car, I can't remember who was driving the 17 car, if it was Byron or Bowman or somebody, but they had an issue in it. And then, of course, in the Cup race, the Chase Elliott-Larson deal on the restart. So, today's birthdays. I'm not going to brag. Today is my birthday. That's why we have balloons. You're probably wondering that all along. So, yay for that. I did celebrate another lap around the sun. So, now our next one I don't have a year for, but Mr. Cliff Daniels, crew chief for Kyle Larson. One we have born on this day in 1980, that I have a card somewhere but I could not find, Mr. Bernie Lamar. Now we're going to go back to 1957. He was a staple with MRN, now he is with the NASCAR Hall of Fame, Mr. Winston Kelley. So look at that, an old Martinsville picture. Look at that, they just had a standard toolbox in the pits, no stands back there, the 76 ball, very iconic photo there. Then I seen this one. It took me a minute, but that's Mark Martin he's interviewing. So another, what do you want to call it, photo bomb or whatever, or, excuse me, Winston Kelley once again, looks like at Daytona, again for MRN. A nice, just a garage scene, another garage scene, and another garage scene. I can't tell what track it is because it does not give me enough landmarks, but Mr. Winston Kelley. Up next, another driver born on this date in 1980, like Bernie Lamar, Mr. Paul Menard. Kind of got these, there's his old Chance 2 Busch Series car. Now, I don't have these in any particular order, but, you know, when you talk Paul Menard, all you're going to have is Menard branding with some vendor sponsors thrown in, like Moen, Quaker State, Peak, eventually Valvoline, and whoever. 2011, he wins at the Brickyard. A very big day for him and his dad, who fielded Indy cars for a number of years. There's like a Valvoline branding, Richmond water heaters. So there's always no shortage of sponsors. And of course, the Menards branding can today still be found on the Penske cars and on the Junior Motorsports Xfinity Series teams. He did race for the Wood Brothers, so he did have, you know, the Motorcraft Quick Lane branding there. There is the Yates Racing, later Richard Petty Motorsports Ford that he drove for a couple of seasons. There's a couple of the RCR cars he drove. And again, different branding, different vendor sponsors. There's another Peak car, but more yellow. Oops, and then we have a Wood Brothers car with the traditional gold on white with the Quick Lane livery. And our final birthday, born on this day in 1928. Sadly, he passed away in 1996. Mr. Elmo Langley. So here you see in the background one of his old Cup cars. It's probably during the 70s because you can see the Winston Cup Series sticker right there, and it's a green 64, so it'd be mid-70s some point. This one was probably taken a little bit earlier. Don't have any reference points there. And there's one of his cars. That would have been from the 60s, pre-Cup Series era. He won 2 races in 1966 with his final one coming at Manassas, Virginia. He did race for a while. I think he raced into the late 70s. Then Tommy Gale took over his car. Then he kind of became a pay owner where people would just pay to drive his cars for a few years. Then he sold his team. I want to say he sold his team to Jim Testa in 1988. Then he moved over to Cale Yarborough's team where he actually became a crew chief for a couple of years for Cale's fledgling operation. Then in the middle of 1989, he took over as NASCAR's pace car driver. This picture here is during the 1991 Legends race where he beat his former boss, Cale Yarborough, to the finish line. I'm trying to see who's behind him there. It's somebody on, is that one of Ernie's crewmen? I can't tell who that is behind him. But the Legends race was super cool. There he is as a NASCAR official. Like I said, he was the pace car driver for a number of years and had other officiating duties. Was always a pretty popular member of the NASCAR officiating community. And sadly passed away while taking some laps on the Suzuka track for the inaugural NASCAR Thunder race in 1996. Buddy Baker, I think, was riding with him in the pace car, and he suffered a fatal heart attack at the wheel. So sorry about this being a long-winded birthday edition, and I wasn't trying to steal any thunder from it, but we just had a lot of ground to cover and a lot of things that went on this day. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoy the video. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday, and we will see you tomorrow.